watching Beyond Clean Live, where clean freaks get their fix.
All right. Welcome, Sterile Processing Universe, to another episode of Beyond Clean Live. Have we got one geared up for you today, locked and loaded? We're going to be talking about a controversial topic or topics today, depending on where you land, compensation in the sterile processing industry. And I have got an all-star lineup of guests today. You're going to recognize these guys for various reasons, all good. Right? So we'll talk to those guys here soon. As you start tuning in, I promise this is going to be worth your time, and it's probably going to be worth your manager's time or your coworkers' time. So do us a favor right now. Stop what you're doing. Share this feed to your network. If you're watching through YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, go ahead and share the feed now and say, guys, you got an hour. Hop on this conversation. Join in, and hopefully let's change the way the industry is talking and thinking and doing about this topic, compensation, certification, and growth in sterile processing. Now, without further ado, let me introduce, or let my panelists introduce themselves to you. Shawn Flynn, would you kick us off?
Well, thank you, Hank. My name is Shawn Flynn. Of course, I share many followers with Hank on LinkedIn, not so much on Facebook, but been in the industry for a ton of years. Hopefully it doesn't show, but been in and out of it for about 30 years. I first entered this space via the military, and I was a surgical assistant. And if those of you know the military, they train you to work in sterile processing as well. And so I very quickly realized in order for me to get out early that day, I had to organize what I needed to organize upstairs versus downstairs. So that was a quick lesson in sterile processing 101. Then I got out and went into biotechnology and tissue banking. I did that for 13 years, where I got a lot of regulatory and compliance training. And then found myself back into healthcare, running Grady Memorial Hospital's level 1 trauma center sterile processing, where I got almost a rude awakening when I came back, because again, my first foray into sterile processing was military, and it's completely different. And so I came back, and policies and procedures and things like that, and infrastructure, all the things that we talk about and share, I got slapped in the face with. And so that was part of starting the mission to try to change this industry as much as I could humanly possibly do. And then that launched an entrepreneurial career, which I've been focused on, pretty much since, where started a startup in Memphis, Tennessee, with the dedication or the focus of creating a packaging system that organized sterile processing instruments in the OR versus sterile processing, so everything is more efficient downstream. Did that for 4 years, and then the company got acquired. And then I found myself at Stanford, helping them open up their children's hospital sterile processing department, and with much success. And now I'm on my next startup. So here I am.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about your background, Shawn, as it pertains to certification as well. So we'll kind of put that a little hook. More of that's coming for Shawn's background. So let's move on to Kevin. Would you introduce yourself, Kevin, to the audience if they don't know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin Anderson, as Hank mentioned, and right now I work with Healthmark Industries as an educator. I've only been with them for just over a year now. And prior to that, I became a nurse in 2003. Moved to the operating room in 2004, been there for primarily the focus of my career, the majority of it. functioning in various roles, whether it was circulator, scrub. I even did some FA training and all that stuff. I managed, I did coordinator, did charge, all of that stuff. So a lot of experience around the OR. And then the last 4 to 5 years of my career in the hospital, I ran the SPD department and endoscopy reprocessing areas. So one of the things that I discovered moving into SPD was a ton of what I thought I knew, I didn't know. Like the entire world just opened up, and I was just like blown away as soon as I stepped into that manager's seat and realized how much I truly didn't know and didn't appreciate about my partners that had been working so long and so hard right beneath me, just 2 floors down. And unfortunately, I think that's, I think it's just a very common thing across the industry, probably the globe over. So, I mean, it's just something that I've been just really hooked on and just trying to help grow the profession ever since. I mean, it's a great place to be, and, great place to try and put, your efforts in and try and move the needle for it.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Kevin. And if you remind me later, I want to circle back around to the topic of nurses as managers of sterile process departments. We're not going to take a lot of time on that, but there's a lot of
sure.
Drama out there online around, nurses coming in sterile processing, like people got some strong opinions about that. But what I want to talk about in the topic of this conversation is the impact that nursing credentials have on your pay. And then that commensurate comparative, you got a sterile processing person over here who's not a nurse. You got a sterile processing person here who is a nurse. Are they getting paid the same? If not, because they're doing the same job, why not? And how do credentials play in that? Okay, so that's a lot. That's a hook for you down the road. I'm going to make people. I'll make
You're
people
setting my point up for me.
Right. Well, okay.
That's all right, though.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Steal your thunder. That's good. That's good. So, as we get going here, guys, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about money. As we said before a couple times, we're going to talk about certification, just because for a lot of the conversations, at least historically, when the topic of pay comes up, it almost immediately changes to a topic about certification. And
Sure.
I don't think that does either one of those topics justice. So I want to spend a little bit of time here in a bit talking about those topics and really hopefully fleshing them out some more. But as we get kicked off, I want to pull up the results of a poll that we did on Beyond Clean here recently, a couple weeks ago. And the question was, what is the approximate starting pay for sterile processing technicians in your state or region? And so we had 4 options there, less than $11, 11 to 14, 15 to 18, or more than $19 an hour, starting off in sterile processing as a technician in your state or region. And you can see the results there. Exactly 5% are starting less than $11 an hour.
Yeah.
I just want to start, Kevin or Shawn, y'all can jump in here, but what is your initial response to, we've got 1 in 20 of our sterile processing technicians are making it less than $11 an hour starting off today. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah. So first of all, that's atrocious. I can give you an example. When I was at Great Memorial Hospital, literally you could walk out the hospital, make a left, and there's a McDonald's there. And no offense to any of the fast food workers that are, in that space. I'm not trying to disparage them in any type of way or lessen their occupation. However, we had sterile processing people making less than, let's say, a front entry level person at a fast food place. And so when I had technicians in my department saying, well, I could go get trained at Lowe's or Home Depot and make more than what I'm doing here with less complication, less risk, what are you to do as a manager? And so that was really the rude awakening that I saw when I came back from tissue banking, in that the salaries weren't commensurate with the work. And so I literally had to, one of the first things I had to do as a manager is you're really focused on retention and growing your homegrown talent. And one of the first things I had to do was do my own market study and go to HR and actually start making the case. And, you know, now the process that there was a little more complicated, but, you know, that was one of the first things I had to do as a new manager, because I had to right size the staffing as well as the salary so that I could keep the talent that was there.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah, jump in there. You've got a comment on the 5%.
Yeah, I was just, obviously the 5%, that's, I mean, I was really hoping for 0% there in that category. Because in my opinion, all these other ones, even 11 to 14, 15 to 18, those aren't even necessarily ideal. And I wonder too, with that more than 19, where are they geographically? Are their cost of living higher? Is it really an equivalent to an 11 to 14 or a 15 to 19, depending on where they live? And I know, you know, and I know a facility around me, in my backyard here has recently raised the minimum wage in the health system to $15 an hour, which was what our entry level techs were making in my department, which, you know, hey, great for all those folks making the minimum wage. But I feel like, unfortunately, in a way, unless those SPD folks get raises equivalent to that, it diminishes what they're doing. And now they're making even less in a sense, you know? Yeah. And so it's just unfortunate. And we had the same struggle that you did, Shawn, in our facility, in our health system, really. But our main hospital, you know, it was much, much larger than the one I was managing. And they had a revolving door of staff because they were constantly challenged with retaining people who would see what the work was, and they'd be like, well, shoot, I can go, just like you said, I can go to Lowe's and make the same amount of money and live a lot less stressful life. You know, it's a no-brainer for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let me transition us here, because y'all both already touched on some of the negative impacts of low pay. And, you know, we can cut this a couple of different ways if you want. We can talk about starting pay. We can talk about average pay as you grow in your career, because I think, you know, both of those obviously have different negative impacts, you know. But Shawn, like you mentioned, recruiting and retaining has both negatively impacted by low pay. But I don't think that quite explains a lot of administrators what happens. They're like, okay, yeah, like you struggle to recruit and retain, but, you know, you got creative, Shawn, you made it happen. So does that just mean that the managers that are struggling are just not as creative, they're not trying hard enough? You know, what are the other implications outside of just recruiting and retaining that flow out of this low pay scale?
I think one of the biggest gaps that I see with, you know, management and the executive ranks is literally that gap. A lot of places, even when I was consulting, I'd go into, you know, the manager's office and I'd ask, how regularly do you sit down with your VP of operations or VP periop who, you know, is over this area? And very rarely did they interact with them. And so if you haven't yet built a relationship up with them, how well are you going to actually plead your case from an operational standpoint that those salaries are justified? The fortunate thing that I had at Grady is I reported directly to the VP of operations. So I actually had a seat at the table where these negotiations and these discussions operationally were happening. And so it was easy for me to triangulate that, have those conversations, and then have parallel conversations in HR backed up by the market data that I actually did. And so it supported that change institutionally. And a lot of hospitals aren't structured like that. So, you know, now whether you are a manager or a director and you report to the director or periop, or you report to the C-suite in some capacity, I would use that as the first mechanism to build that bridge to make that case. because they don't, all they know is that instruments come in, instruments are supposed to come out sterile. They don't know in other words, they don't know how the sausage is made, basically.
Right.
And
What do
nor
you
do
think,
they
Kevin?
want to.
I mean,
No,
yeah, do you have anything to add from that administrative perspective, Kevin? I mean, coming from the OR, right, your perspective on the output or the quality output of a department that may be struggling to retain its employees or to recruit employees. You had to have seen that firsthand in a lot of ways that administrators and even sterile processing managers don't see.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you kind of hinted at. One would be a gap sometimes with just our management and the skills that we have as managers, because, and I don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole, but it is an important thing to recognize when sterile processing techs, even surgical techs, or even nurses, when they're promoted to management roles, it's because they were good at that clinical or technical position they were in. You don't have management skills yet. You're literally coming in and trying to figure that out. So you have to have either a built-in way of that's already there, communication lines with that C-suite, or you have to create it and then learn how to do it and have somebody that mentors you or whatever it is. But you have to have that bridge built in some way. And unfortunately, I think what happens is a lot of us get in over our head because we don't know. And then we're starting to focus on putting out fires in our department instead of building that relationship with the C-suite like we need to. And it goes both ways. I mean, the C-suite really should take some time and get to know what's going on in all their departments. But I know their jobs are different and it's hard to do all those things, but it definitely goes both ways. You got to learn about each other. You know, it's not just one or the other.
Kevin, you actually bring up a good point, Kevin, in that I was lucky to have 2 VP of operations in the tenure that I was at Grady, who actually did rounds, and one of their rounds was sterile processing. They would actually be in the department with a bunny suit on, even if I wasn't in the department or not. So that's the level of transparency and visibility that institution had. And I wish, like you said, more institutions, more people in the C-suites would be able to do that, because it's a key piece with perioperative operations. And I don't see how, even more physicians don't come down because it affects their operation. So
that's right.
Well, they do come down. They come down when they're mad, and they're like, why can't you get this right? Well, the answer, Doc, is I don't have enough positions. I can't recruit high quality folks. I can't keep the folks that are high quality. That's why we can't get this right, Doc. So you're going to help me with that? Well, yeah, it's too late by that point. Well, it's not too late to fix it, but the damage has already started to be done. If the doctor and if your customer is seeing it, and potentially it's already reaching the patient, right? So when I'm talking about, negative impacts, like we're covering it here, right? It's not just that we can't get people in the door, keep people in the door. Those people impact quality in service in all kinds of different ways. And I think going back to the comment, I guess to the story that you shared, Shawn, about doing your own market research. It's great that you did that. It's trash that you had to do that. That's freaking ridiculous that a manager who works for a facility that has its own HR department and its own budget to do market research and to do surveys and to ensure that all of their departments are staffed, that a manager has to go out of their way to do those kind of things. But you know what? You're not alone, because I have heard a lot of sterile processing folks out there in the field having to do their own market research however they can. We're not trained to do HR market research either, in addition to leadership, to your point, Kevin. It's all being pushed down on us to improve quality. And yet, we're trying to do this without the skills or training or access, that we need.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think to your point about market research, one thing about that, which it is great, it's a great place to start, because usually you find out that, your competitors right down the road are paying more than you and whatever. But one thing that's not so good about that is you are just comparing yourself to another facility that's probably not paying where they should be. So you're really going to get to the point where you're at water level, but you're really not exactly where you want to be yet, which is the unfortunate part about it. It's definitely a step in the right direction, and we got to do it. We did that as well in our health system. But unfortunately, that's only halfway there,
I would add to that, Kevin. I would just add to that and say that when I did it at Grady, I compared other institutions who actually implemented certification and sought what was the delta between pre-certification and post-certification of that mandate. And what I found was that these hospitals in the area that we were in were actually paying their technicians more post-certification. So I used that as a justification because our institution was actually pushing and mandating certification. And if you didn't get certified within the second try, then you actually would be, dismissed. And I want some incentive. You can't tell technicians, hey, I want you to get this, continuing education and this certification with no additional pay, right? It just doesn't make sense to me. And with all the other quality demands that you place on the technician and pressure.
Agree.
So let's talk industry challenges a little bit, because we've been talking impact of pay and everything that entails, for both technicians and the department leaders. But taking a step back and just saying, as an industry, what's going on? What's going on outside of this compensation question, but has implications to how we pay, how we source, how we recruit. And I'll give you one example, and Kevin, you can kick us off on this one if you want to. But a couple of months ago, I had an interview with James Carlock talking about the looming staffing crisis that is coming to not only sterile processing, healthcare in general, but sterile processing as a sector of healthcare. So there's a staffing crisis coming because of the aging workforce. And I think because of a lot of the things that we're talking about today, it's kind of the chicken or the egg scenario. But, we got a staffing crisis coming. That's one of the challenges that's confronting. And frankly, if we keep doing what y'all are talking about with the market research looking next door, well, if no one's getting prepared for the tornado that's coming, well, that's not going to be good for any of us, because when it comes, we're not going to be ready. So, what else do you see out there, Kevin, that you would say is a big challenge that's coming down the pipeline, is already here for the industry?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the biggest challenges is people understanding that this industry exists, number one, and obviously education is part of that. So, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but bringing up the subject of education, when there's college level courses, what do colleges do when they have programs? They advertise them. They do career days. They do everything they can to promote that program in order to grow it and grow awareness and, bring students in and things like that. So, I mean, those are things that, in my opinion, are lacking right now. Like, there's no kids. I mean, I think there was something on LinkedIn about this recently. Who knows about, who grows up thinking, I'm going to go be a sterile processing tech? No one even is aware. They have no clue. Right. And even in the hospital, it's like that. I mean, the majority of people, even as shameful as it sounds, even in the OR, like, we literally send our case cards down to these people who magically turn them around and give them back to us, but very rarely go down and actually live a day in their lives. It's really bad. I think it's that overall awareness and education. I think those two things are just huge.
Kind of jump in on the awareness part, because I totally agree with that. And I'm going to give a selfless plug because it's my show and I can do what I want.
It's your birthday.
That's right.
My
Yeah.
birthday. Right. You guys are making me work for my birthday. No, so the next season 11 of the Beyond Clean podcast, I'm coming on as a guest, and the topic that I'm going to be talking about is sterile processing as a culture. Now, I don't mean like, culture stuff. Like everybody talks about culture. No, I'm talking about what you're talking about, Kevin, which is what makes us an industry. Like what is a culture and what is the sterile processing culture? And a small part of that, like I think it has to do with music, and it has to do with media, has to do with books, has to do with education. To your point, has to do with clothing. Man, there are more people out there selling sterile processing T-shirts than in the history of our industry. Like the last, 2-3 years, just like exploded. You can sterile processing anything out there. But just actually a couple weeks ago, my wife and I started writing 2 different children's books that we're going to write, and they're going to be called My Daddy Fights Dirty and My Mommy Fights Dirty, and we're going to be writing them for kids. Why? Because your point, no kid out there, even kids of sterile processing professionals, know what their mommy or daddies do when they go to work, and so we're going to write a book about it. Now, this is not like one children's book is not going to change the world, but we're not going to change the world unless we start doing concrete things like that, I think, to build a culture. So I just want to throw that out there. The book is coming. We'll put the link to the book, here a couple of months once it gets published. But yeah, stay tuned on that. So a good insight there, Kevin. Shawn, what do you think? Like, what else is out there?
I think, the challenges, of course, or I would say the ripple effect of low-paid sterile processing department employees is the traveler aspect, right? It always bugged me that we could have a person who would quit today and tomorrow come back to the hospital, and they're paying the agency $50+ an hour, right? So, that's one residual aspect. And then if, to James's point, industry is changing and people aren't moving into this space, and you have a whole population that's retiring out of that has that institutional knowledge. What I see is industry is going to adapt, and a lot of the things that I'm doing on the entrepreneurial side, I am seeing shifts in this space. And one of the aspects of where I see the shift is there's a lot more automation that has taken place within the last 10 years than I've ever seen in my 30 years in this space. And it will continue to happen. So I would, if I had to give any advice to a technician right now, is to be curious about every device that comes through that department tied to that manufacturer, understand what that manufacturer does, because I think the other ripple effect is that you can parlay that into a occupation with a device manufacturer, because now you have the end user knowledge related to that. And even if it's at minimum doing side jobs or consulting and doing IFU development, so be it. But start being curious about the devices that you see on a daily basis, because if you don't do that, you're going to treat it as a entry-level job, and you're going to get the results from you thinking that it's an entry-level job.
I love what you just said there about being curious. Oh my gosh. And there's so many times I think back now, I wish I would have been even more curious than I already was. When you call clinical engineering to come fix your equipment, you should really be back there spending time learning how they're fixing that equipment. I mean, and that was another technique in the operating room. I mean, that propels scrub techs to success or nurses to success is studying that, the surgical technique for that procedure, or the preference card of that physician, or the insert of that mechanical stapler that's in there. Who reads the inserts, right? I mean, curious people read it, and then you learn, and then you have other opportunities that you mentioned, Shawn. I mean, it's so often we kind of gripe about our lot when we could be better using the time that we have in our facilities, becoming those end user experts. And I mean, definitely you got to do that. I mean, even if you can't get your hourly rate now that you want, build towards your future, take every opportunity to do so.
Yeah. And Kevin, I would also add that with offsite reprocessing becoming more and more prevalent here in the States, I would start getting into ISO, manufacturing,
Yep.
learning those principles, because I do think if I have a window in time and I can see the future, that is going to be the prevailing, theme moving forward. Offsite reprocessing, automation, robotics.
Yes, sir.
So the more curious they can be related to those devices and trying to understand from an ISO standpoint or manufacturing standpoint where they can fit in and create their own opportunity, I think, it's an entry-level position, but you don't have to treat it that way. There's all kind of avenues that you can go into. I mean, I remember when Hank was, first-time manager, and look at what he's doing now. Who's gonna think that any of us would do a podcast related to sterile processing? So, there's all kind of avenues out there, and you just have to have your eyes open and see those opportunities. And then what happens, Will, the hospitals, once you see this transition to offsite reprocessing, you see more automation, robotics. Now, if you're a technician in this space, you're actually, and I call them sterile processing engineers at that point, because now you're operating a similar to what would be a factory floor, and you should then be therefore paid accordingly, right?
Right.
There you go.
So y'all have brought up a ton of stuff. Like I'm trying to keep it all straight in my mind, but we have to go back to a couple things. But the comment about automation, like we got to put this out here front and center. It is coming, ladies and gentlemen. If you work in sterile processing, in healthcare, automation is coming. Just like 10 years ago, they should have told the folks that work at the grocery store, hey, self-checkout is coming. Don't even try to fight it. There's nothing that you can do to stop this from coming. It's coming. Now, just because we say automation, like that's what people think. They think, okay, yeah, self-checkout, that means no more checkers.
No.
What they don't realize is automation is not inherently replacing people. It's letting people do more things with their time, with their skill, and with their effort, right? Yep. So I have saved the first controversial statement till right here, 32 minutes into the show, okay? And I think I may have been misunderstood over the years as I have waved the compensation flag, and I continue to say, pay sterile processing more. And folks who don't read everything I write or listen to everything I say, they're like, yeah, just throw money. Like, that's the solution. Throw money at this department, throw money at these people, and everything's going to be fixed. Nobody on this panel is saying that, I know. But if you listen to some of the frontline technicians, like the solution is just, give me more money. Well, in the business world, Shawn, right? Money has to come from somewhere. And especially in healthcare today, you're looking at budgets in these hospitals that are shrinking. How can sterile processing leaders and technicians make an argument for more money if nothing else is changing? So here's the controversial piece. I think in order for us to get to where we're going, one part of the solution is we have to become comfortable as sterile process professionals on learning how to do more with less, not less resources. I mean, less of our time, less of our effort to utilize and leverage automation and robotics and data and training. And instead of one technician only being able to process 20 trays a day or 30 trays a day, now a technician can process 60 trays a day. Well, what have you just done? You freed up a multiple of a salary where instead of getting paid, $15 an hour, you'd be paid $30 an hour because you're producing at the same rate as 2 employees. Now, this is controversial because people can do the math. We talked about all of that and everything else later, but I don't think that simply saying pay us more is going to get us anywhere if we say pay us more, period. I think we got to say pay us more, comma, and then continue on. All right, what do y'all think?
Well, what you're saying is there's already proof that it's not working, because that's what we've been saying for decades, right? I mean, as an industry, it's always been pay us more, but without any other actions around that, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So the people who have success raising wages in their facilities, it's because they're going and doing something actively, whether it's the market analysis that Shawn did, or I've also heard of people doing creative things like creating a career ladder within sterile processing, which is fantastic. But this is not standardized. This is like all hit and miss all over the board. Every facility is different. And even within the same health system, a lot of times you have something going on at site A that site B is not doing, and vice versa. So, I mean, I think to your point though, is that you can't just say you need something and give nothing in return, or expect nothing of yourself in return, to justify that. I think we have to do better,
Right.
Yeah, Hank, I'll give you two examples. So I got the one book-ended experience in Grady, another book-ended experience at Lucille Packard. And one you would say was underfunded, didn't have all the resources that it needed. And the other hand, I did have all the resources that we needed as a department, and yet I still had some of the same quality issues. That tells me right there, it's not necessarily the pay that the root cause to the problem. It's really, my personal opinion on this, and that is backed up by experience, is that the problem is rooted in technology and resources that allow the technician to be successful. Think about it. We're asking technicians to inspect things that they don't know of. They can't see certain things based on human anatomy. Some things are so small you can't see with a human eye. So why are we telling then technicians to actually perform a task from which they're set up from day one to fail, right? And then make the job so difficult that we're going to pay them 10, 11 bucks an hour to do that job, right? So that's why I got into technology and entrepreneurship, is because I wanted to be the one trying to create tools that actually allow the technicians to do their job better than what they could have done, which then they can show, hey, I can do a good job. And I actually now, because I know more about the technology, I know more about the operations, therefore then I can be justified in having this particular salary. So those are things that, again, curiosity, it goes back to curiosity. These technicians moving into this space are in a department that has so much value in it. They just have to open their eyes and see it. I mean, think about all the loaner trays and the various manufacturers that come through a sterile processing department that they have access to, right? Right. So I'd say curiosity, learn about these manufacturers, build bridges with these manufacturers. And, particularly if you're a frontline employee, I've known so many technicians that went in to become field reps just based on them building bridges with, and I'm not trying to move.
Now let's talk about that. But I want to talk about that, right? Yeah. Because if anyone's paying attention, you got three guys who no longer work in a sterile processing department, okay, talking about sterile processing compensation. And I think, that deserves a pat on our back, because we don't have to talk about this topic. Like, why are we still talking about some place that doesn't pay our bills? Well, it's because we care about the people who do, and because each one of us have lived that and have worked there and have seen it. I've got friends and family members who are still working in sterile processing departments. Like, this matters to me. This is an industry that we love. That's why we're talking about it. However, and it's another controversial one, putting out here is, like, practically speaking, are hospitals next week gonna just wake up and start paying people more? Are we gonna be able to change the industry within 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? Likely not. So if you're sitting there, Mr. Technician or Mrs. Supervisor or Mr. Manager or whatever your role is, and you're looking at your bills every month and you're looking at your paycheck and you're thinking, like, these don't fit together, the most strategic option may be for you to look outside a hospital setting, still in the industry, just like all three of us did, but outside of the hospital setting, in places that can reward that curiosity, can reward the drive that we've been talking about, with compensation that matches your quality of output and commitment to the job. Because in the hospital setting today, there's so many brick walls and so many rules and comparative, trash, that even a manager that has every good intention of getting their people paid, their hands are often tied. So then what do you say? Keep working here and don't pay your bills, or potentially go rep for another company like you're talking about, Shawn, or Kevin, take a job for Health Mart, right? Like, you got to do what you got to do. Not that you went to Health Mart, for the money, but there are a plethora of options and companies and creative opportunities out there for folks that get to know the industry, but still want to grow more financially and have some freedom.
Well, Hank, let me clarify something. So Kevin brought up the career ladder in the department. So if an entry-level person coming in, I don't expect them to even have the connections or network associated with vendors and that sort of thing. What I'm saying is, from day one coming into a department, whether you're paid, at minimum wage or you're paid above minimum wage slightly, is that you build those habits of curiosity from day one. Because once you get to, let's say, Tech 3, or even make the ranks of supervisor, manager, would have then built up a network as well as a knowledge base that would propel you to go anywhere. Whether you want to be a director of sterile processing over multiple facilities and run operations, or whether you want to go the sales route, or you want to go the service rep type route, or even being a consultant. So that I just wanted to clarify that point to say, not everybody coming in the door is going to have that level of experience, but if they come through that door from day one, just being curious about all aspects of operations, the manufacturing side, the network associated with sterile processing, the OR, how it relates economically to the OR, they start connecting those dots, they'll be fine.
Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have to definitely understand what Shawn is saying, and that applies no matter what your role is. And one thing that I think obviously we're all agreeing on is that our techs aren't getting paid enough. But I will tell you, there are nurses, there are doctors, there are admins. They all believe they're not getting paid enough. So
right.
You have to go and build the value within what you're doing, and the way to do that is just what Shawn's saying, is being curious, learning, get your hands dirty in every situation you possibly can, learn how to troubleshoot, because in the near term, to your point, Hank, this is not going to change overnight. I shouldn't even say starting the conversation, we're having the conversation, but we just had Pennsylvania become the 5th state to mandate certification. The first state was 20 years ago. All right. So that's a long way to go, and a very, very slow pace. And while I celebrate that as a huge success, that isn't going to move the needle in the near term. Like it's not going to solve the problem for everybody. And I don't want to
talk about certification.
Yeah.
No, I think we're at a point now in the conversation we can talk about certification. That's on the title of the thing, and I haven't brought it up yet. But like I said at the very beginning, when we typically talk about compensation, we go right there, Kevin. We say, okay, we need to pass legislation in the state to change the compensation. Now, Shawn, I'm going to put you on the spot here, right? So I love telling this story, because I don't think you get enough credit for the work that you did, even in the background, right? So I'm not saying that you did this single-handedly, even though I use that phrase sometimes, but it takes people like you committed to a cause to get something done. And you did it in Tennessee, right? So you built relationships with legislators in Tennessee to get the Tennessee legislation passed. And it kind of came out of nowhere. Industry folks didn't even see it coming, didn't know it was on the docket. And they're like, boom, Tennessee's added to the list. right? But I want to ask you, you know, like we're a number of years out now from Tennessee, and not that it's been long enough really to even change the market that much in Tennessee, but looking back on that legislation piece, and then to Kevin's point about how long it has taken us to do that, you know, what is your perspective today on the place that certification, in particular legislating certification, has on compensation for sterile processing folks?
Wow. I can tell you that in that short period of time, compensation didn't come up one time while I was negotiating that the legislation. One of the things, at least that I learned during that process, is the art of, I guess, legislating, right? And I had the fortunate experience to interact with the Senate, at that time, the Senate Majority Leader for the state of Tennessee. And so the conversation came up because I was in Tennessee, and my last company was a medical device startup that was in Memphis, and this was in his district. And he was interested in economic development. And so we were talking about what we did as a company. And through that conversation, I was able to illustrate some of the problems that prevail in the industry. And it then segued into this thought in my head that said, well, let me ask if I write legislation, would he actually sponsor it? Because you need a sponsor, whether it be the House or the Senate, to actually pass or submit legislation. And so I asked him on a whim. I just said, hey, this is a big problem. And, I don't think sterile processing has been legitimized like it should. This will be a step to legitimizing it. What do you think? And he said, yes. And so literally, like Hank says, it came out of the blue, July of, say, 2016. I wrote it, and then it was on the books in committee in January of 2017. And by July, it was signed by the governor. And that's how fast this particular legislation happened. And it was purely because he knows how to legislate. He's a Senate Majority Leader, so he knows how to pull certain levers within the legislature, and did it with, such, ease and quickness. I mean, and at the time, I'll tell you a personal story. He didn't tell me that he had a personal friend who died of a surgical site infection. So when he was doing this, he had a connection to that and wanted to see the industry better so that things like that would happen to his friend wouldn't happen. And so I only knew that afterwards when a local newspaper did a story about it. Now, as far as certification raising or being the catalyst to raise pay within this space, I think it's a first step, but it's not necessarily the root cause to get you higher pay. I always say certification is your entry point into the space. It's not your ending point. Okay. There are ASQ certifications that you get. There are ISO certifications that you can get. So many other certifications that you can get to raise your level of experience, which then is commensurate with the pay. And I'll end this on this note. As a manager or as an employee, I've always had the philosophy of doing the job that I want to do before I do it. So therefore, when I ask the manager for that opportunity, I'm already doing that job. So it's really a shift in mindset. And I think if people focus on gaining those certifications, being curious, and if their hospital mandates it or not, they are personally responsible for for them showcasing themselves. I'll say it that way. Nobody's else going to do it for you, right? So
Kevin, I'm going to set you up here for that certification question. But before I do, I just want to say, I don't know if I disagree with you, Shawn, or I don't know if I'm just withholding a decision until the data comes back. And I say that a little coy because this past summer, Beyond Clean did one of the largest surveys of the industry ever. We talked a lot about economics, education, all that information. We've gotten a lot of it back. We haven't published or talked about it any yet, and I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but let me just say that there's some interesting data points around this conversation. So we'll put a little period there. So stay tuned for that.
It'll move the needle. I will say that. But as far I'm separating and making the distinction that when you're talking about legislation and talking with legislatures, it can't necessarily be the catalyst to make your point on why that legislation needs to be passed. Because you're going to have folks like the Hospital Association and other lobbyist groups who might come in who say, no, we don't want that, because then that's going to then raise salaries or put pressure on raising salaries for everybody else, or whatever the argument is. And
that'd be the end of the world, right? If we had to raise salaries for everybody in healthcare. Let's just call them heroes, right? We call them heroes. Great.
So I'm just making the point that in order to what were we trying to do? We were trying to get the legislation passed. So I was not going to muddy the waters or muddy the conversation by actually talking about things that weren't.
Yeah, I think you did it the right way. Yeah, no, no disagreement there. Now, Kevin, I want to put you on the spot though, because you said something on LinkedIn maybe a week and a half ago, and it was actually what prompted my idea to have this panel and to bring us together, because you were talking about your perspective on the purpose of certification, where certification should fit in your career timeline, right? We've been assuming kind of through this conversation that the sooner you get certified, the better. Perhaps you even need to be certified to work in the state, like some of this legislation is talking about. But you voiced a different opinion, and I'm not going to explain. I'll let you explain it for the audience. But kind of talk us through, because I happen to like what you said. I like the angle that you're taking, and I think on the data piece, we have more data that shows that your perspective is a good one for quality. Not necessarily, we don't have a lot of compensation data around this, but in terms of driving quality and growth in an industry, I think you may be a little bit closer to the answer. So what is your idea on it all?
Well, thanks for teeing that up. And I feel like I need to preface this with, because of some of the comments that were made on that post, and that was actually on Shawn's post too. But
was it?
Yeah.
Hey, that's why y'all came over.
Exactly. But I had made the comment about potentially education being a starting point to propel wages higher and elevating the entry level of education to be something in the realm of an associate's degree. Now, this is just an idea, an opinion, throwing an idea out there. This is not like me trashing anybody who's in the industry right now. I love you all. Trust me. I really do. My wife just went in to have procedure done. My daughter's been in to have procedure done. Tremendous respect for what everybody does. But seriously though, when it comes to entry level in our arena right now, I just think that I think about sterile processing and how it's been evolving over time. And I think about the parallel between that and nursing. Like, there was a huge turning point with Florence Nightingale and turning it into a more of a scientific field and more of a professional field. And then there was a boom in education programs further down the line. And eventually it became something greater than just, caring for the sick and poor with untrained people. They had established real programs, associate level programs, diploma programs, all of that stuff. And even now, today, they're talking about elevating it again to a bachelor's. And the only reason I believe that they haven't done it already is the shortage. And they've talked about that with CRNAs. They're talking about moving them from masters to doctorates. And this is something that's going on all over the place. And in nursing, they've actually collected data, to Michael Matthews' point in his comment regarding quality, but they've made that distinction that, when there's more bachelor's prepared nurses, patients are safer in that facility. And I happen to believe that, that same correlation could play out in sterile processing. And because it is so important, it is more scientific, it is more detailed than it ever was. We have to know chemistry, microbiology. We have to know a little bit of clinical engineering. We have to know a little bit of lean and manufacturing and quality and all of that stuff. I mean, it's the amount of knowledge the knowledge base has grown has just been astronomical. And people who've been in the field forever, they've been incrementally growing their knowledge base over a long period of time, which is great. But when you're talking about entry-level techs coming in now, like you're talking right now, they only need a high school diploma or GED, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have 30 years of experience to draw on. So they're coming in and they literally have patients' lives in their hands, and they have no background knowledge, nothing, absolutely nothing. So that's where I think that we at least need to entertain the idea of bringing up, at least at the very least, maybe an associate's degree for management level techs, and then maybe down the line grow that into the entry level for our techs. I mean, that's just, again, it's just an opinion, you know.
Can I? Yeah. So I didn't see the responses on that thread, or maybe I would have been a little better prepared for this. But I know from an education standpoint, you know, I got 2 college degrees. Neither one of them are in sterile processing. Actually, when I got my first management job in sterile processing, I was going to law school at the time and had started my second year of law school, and then I was offered this manager's job, and I decided, you know, do I get paid a little bit more or do I keep paying student loans? Well, I'm going to get paid a little bit more. So I went into sterile processing management. But there's this great quote that I'm going to butcher from a guy named G.K. Chesterton, who says, without education, we would be in a terrible habit of trusting those who have education. You know, basically what he's saying is, like, just because you have a college degree doesn't mean you know anything, right? Like, we've all know PhDs out there that couldn't tie their shoes in the morning. And so I think all of us agree too, you know, there's not going to be a silver bullet that if we do this, everything's going to change. It does have to be a collaborative push to looking at education. Actually, the question I was getting at, Kevin, like you kind of touched on, but it was your comment around should certification be what happens at the beginning?
Oh yeah,
the baseline of your entry into it, or should it be some kind of higher level confirmation of all that knowledge that you've grown? So I wonder if you could speak to that, you know, just briefly.
Yeah, my apologies. I forgot to get to that part. Yeah, but again, similarly in nursing, like I carry multiple certifications in nursing. You know, a certification denotes expertise. And in our industry, we're talking about baseline knowledge. This is what your entry level tech should know. And I think we just have it flip-flop backwards. I believe in that. Hey, you should have an entry-level knowledge base. You should, another thing in nursing school that you get is clinical experience, right? So you could have experience and a knowledge base right out of the get-go that's going to help you. And then your certifications, this doesn't negate certifications. It elevates certification. Now it's showing an area of expertise, a true expertise above and beyond that baseline. And that's where I think both of those things could really work in elevating the profession and possibly subsequently getting the pay upgraded as well. When HR sees that entry level is high school diploma, they're going to be scratching their head wondering why they should raise the wages. So one of two things has to happen, in my opinion, is either the entry level prerequisites need to go up, and two, actually, it's not an either or, it's both. We need to communicate our story better. We need to be telling people what we're doing more effectively. We have to take that burden and do better at what we're doing. And this is a great part of it, but this is just a small part. People have to be doing this in their facilities every day.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think, Shawn?
I think it should be the beginning. I mean, CRCST, even the not the CHL, CIS, I think that should be entry level. That gives you at least the minimum foundational knowledge to actually, be in a sterile processing environment. And at least shows that you actually, took some time to study up on, the basics. And, you know, to then have that to justify an increase in salary when you're, you know, certified with no experience, entry level into the department, no, there's a difference between that and a living wage. That's a whole nother discussion, right? So I think they should be paid living wages upon entry into the department. Again, that's a different conversation, but I think the certification is from the beginning, gives you a foundational knowledge base for the department, and therefore after that you can take other certifications that increase your knowledge base, i.e. ASQ. You can learn how to be there's a kind of quality type exams that you can take. You know, if you want to get into more operational or Lean Six Sigma, you can go that route. But the entry level, you know, ISHM certification, I think that's, you know, commensurate with you beginning in that field.
Okay. Good. We got some good agreement there. I like that.
And that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with that. You know, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would disagree, and that's okay. I don't take any offense to it. I'm just trying to share a possibility that I believe could really enhance not only the industry but patient safety, all of those things. Like I really think the way things are going, when I think about the people who have had to I've had to go and help people troubleshoot issues with their machines, and it's taken weeks, if not months sometimes, to figure out how to get them to pass quality tests, and working with the manufacturers. A lot of that stuff is there's a lot more that goes into it. We talk about it at HealthMark, the factors of clean, you know, whether it's you know, just and that's just cleaning. That's just like one little niche area, and it's so complex, and with machines and human factors and all that, there's so many things that can go wrong. I don't like the idea of relying on every single outsourced department in order to get your department running again. Like, you need some on-site expertise, and the way we can elevate those local experts is through higher education, I think. You know, and but certification again is a great. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I think that's a good thing too.
The idea of certification, because I'm going to disagree with both of y'all, and it's not going to be new to anybody who listens or reads what I write, but I think the data is still out on sterile processing certifications for the impact that it has on quality and for the impact it has on pay. Now, like I said before, we've got a lot of data from the summer surveys that we did that are going to address that financial piece. But at the end of the day, do we have hard data in the industry that shows that the current certifications and the structure of the certification, the timing of the certification actually impacts quality outcomes? Now, that may be asking a trick question, because there's so many inputs to quality. It's not just sterile processing. It's the facilities, you know, it's your steam quality, it's your operating room, it's your surgeon technique. I get that. However, for us to be having a good, healthy, industry-facing debate, and for the industry to have a debate, I think we can't have a true debate and actually know what we're talking about unless someone starts putting some hard data on the table and say, yeah, this is working, or it's kind of working, but it could be better, or it's not working at all. Let's just blow it up and try something new. And so I want to challenge the audience. I want to challenge you guys. You guys don't really need challenging, but I want to challenge everybody else out there to think critically about all of this we've been talking about. If it's education, like if you agree with Kevin, you think like we need to be pushing toward that college level, associate level degree, which, by the way, Peter Nickel on our team, chief medical officer, like that's where he sits. He's a huge advocate of really pushing that option, not as mandatory up front, you know, but as an option to bring in some higher level, high trained folks, you know, coming out of high school that want to do that. They already know that's the career they want to do. But wherever it is, you know, if you're there, if you're in a place that all 50 states need to have legislation that drive mandatory certification before your feet hit the door for day one, I just want to say, prove it. Prove it with data, show us data so that we can all know that we're making smart decisions. Otherwise, we're just kind of guessing and hoping that it's working, and nobody wants to put a patient on the table under that scenario. Now, it's like with everything else, the train has already left the station. Surgeries are happening. We got diversity and complexity all over the industry. We got people certified, not certified. We got people with college degrees, not college degrees. We got great training programs and departments. We got departments who are just like, 3 days orientation, then boom, you hit back in DKTM. Good luck. None of those are good options, right? So we're at the end of our time. We went like a little bit long. I know we're going to have to come back to round 2, but I don't want to cut y'all off. So let's kind of sum this up. If you want to drop a bomb for your last comment or summary, this is the time to drop a bomb. If you want to be, non-controversial and just summarize, your point, your big takeaway that you want people, now's your time. And I think we started with Shawn first. So Kevin, we'll go, this way down the screen. You can give us some final words, and then I'll close this out.
Yeah, I just, I guess just to summarize, what I think what we're trying to do here is just elevate the discussion, get some more awareness out there. I think that, since we're all in agreement that we're not happy about the wages, all right. But when that happens, when we have that consensus going on, we need to at least look at what we can do in our neck of the woods to change that. So number one, to echo some of the things that Shawn has said, is to be curious in your position and to always try and elevate your game and do stuff that's outside of, the normal job description to become a better expert at what you do, because not only is it good for you, but it's good for the patients that are visiting your facility. But number two is, I just think that we need to entertain that idea of elevating the education game in our industry. I just think it's time to at least have that conversation and entertain it as a possible solution, because even though, to your point, Hank, we don't have necessarily the data, part of that is because the education standard is not where it needs to be yet. Even though certification is a great starting place, it's only mandated in 5 states. It's hit and miss at different facilities, all of that stuff. So consequently, what happens is the way people manage their quality, the way people manage their data and all of their facilities, it's all different. When I first started managing, the only KPI we had was IUSS. Can you believe that? That was it. That was the only thing reported on, IUSS. Like, there are a world of data points out there to be measuring, and we don't even have a consensus 10 that we're all measuring all the time and reporting up through ISHM or up through some organization where people have transparency to all of our quality data. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think we have so much potential to move the needle, and, we just got to look at what our part is. What can we do to actually do that instead of just complaining?
Right. Amen. Shawn, what do you think?
I'm gonna probably give some tough love to the community out there and just say the industry is changing, and what I see on the horizon again is a lot of tools that other industries use being migrated into our space, and unless you have the curiosity and the acumen, or the acumen follows the curiosity, what I don't want is what happened to the auto industry or the mining industry, whereas technicians, the technology and the industry changed, and then overnight people no longer could do those jobs, right? Or those jobs went away, right? So if I had to look into a crystal ball into the future, if technicians really want to higher wages, they want to legitimize the industry, yes, certification is good, higher education is good, but you need to be curious and look at the industry as a space that you can grow into. So sterile processing Tech 1 is entry level into a whole new world where you have endless possibilities. But always be that lifelong learner in this space. And if you could continue to do that, I think you'll be fine. But this industry is going to change, and it's going to change for a lot of people who, I remember technicians, 5 years ago telling me, oh, then automation will never be here, or, AI will never be in here, or, whatever. And I'm already seeing tugs, carry trays from, the case cart to the conveyor belt to the washer, goes through the washer. What's next, right? It's coming. It's already here. So if we're already fearful of low wages right now, don't wait on the hospital to pay you more. Get a necessary education, be curious, and move into areas that you naturally gravitate towards, right? And it might not be sterile process. It might be a rep for another company. It might be doing education. It might be doing a podcast like you, Hank. But change with the industry. Don't let the industry change overnight and then you're outside looking in. I'll end it on that.
Right. Okay. Well, I've got two things to say. Actually, three things to say. Number one, guys, this has been a terrific interview, and I really appreciate you bringing the heat today, telling us how it really is, what your opinion is, what your insight is. And I think the more honest and transparent that we are, the better this industry is going to grow, and the better the direction is that we're going to be in. That's number one. Two, and these aren't bombs, but there's some hard truth. I had a lady ask me about a year and a half ago. She loved the industry, fairly new, just gotten certified. Her rate was not able to pay the bills. And she lived in a community where there were no other comparative hospitals, to go. And so her options were get another job or stay in sterile processing, but struggle to pay the bills. And I told her, it's my personal opinion. She was a single mom. I said, hey, provide for your family. Go do what you need to do outside. Sterile processing is not going anywhere. If you get it all back in action, and you can come back in a framework that allows you to work and pay the bills, and there you go. But don't feel locked into something just because you love it, because at the end of the day, you got to provide for your loved ones in the same way, like we always say, if your loved ones was on the table, do the tray like it was them. Well, you're going to go to home to your loved ones, and you got to pay the bill. You got to put food on the table. And if your sterile processing department today is not doing it, I want to encourage you to do what's right for your family and let the rest of us worry about fixing the industry. All right, that's number two. Three, and this is it's my favorite quote of the interview so far, and it goes to this question, comment, confusion around, hey, if this is an industry that you love, does it really matter? We're not in it for the money, right? Well, I want to see us start paying surgeons a $15 an hour wage and see how many of those folks stick around. Nothing against surgeons. Those folks love patient care. They're in this, because they're making a difference in people's lives, same reason we are. But start paying them $15 an hour and see what happens. Yeah. Now that's the inverse. We're not asking to be paid, $300,000, $400,000 a year in sterile processing, but the same is true for both of us. We're both here. We love what we're doing. We're doing it for the patient, but we both got to find a way to compensate so that folks can do this job and still keep a lights on at home. Thank you all for tuning in today through Facebook, through LinkedIn, and through YouTube. And again, if you are watching this live, this is a great time to share the feed and say, yep, it was everything they talked it up to be. A lot of fun, learned stuff, got angry, got encouraged, whatever it was. And until next time, I want to encourage each and every one of y'all to continue fighting dirty. Shawn and Kevin, if you'll hang out just for a second after I end the broadcast, we can circle back around. And have a good week, guys. Happy birthday to me, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Hank.